Hey everyone! Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way YouTube will keep showing you more stories just like this one. Alright, let's get started. I grew up hearing my grandmother say, "Don't walk past the Douglas place after dark." It wasn't a threat exactly, more like weather advice. You don't go out in the rain without a coat, and you don't go past the last house on Larch Road at night. Everyone in our town knew it. Nobody explained it. The Douglas house sat at the very end of a narrow gravel road, beyond the reach of the streetlights. It had been empty for decades, peeling clapboard siding, a porch with one corner sagging like a broken jaw, and windows that were somehow always darker than the rest of the night. We'd tell stories about it in middle school. How old man Douglas had died at the kitchen table with his eyes open, how his wife had vanished into cornfield, how the police found claw marks on the inside of the walls. But the truth was less dramatic. The Douglas family left town after their youngest son drowned. The house was never sold, and yet nobody broke in, nobody tagged it. No teenagers drank beer on the porch. It just stood there. When I was 17, my friend Paul dared me to walk past it after midnight. He offered $50. I took it, mostly because I didn't think he'd actually pay me, but also because I wanted to prove something. I didn't know what. That night, I walked down Larch Road with my phone flashlight pointed at the gravel. The sound of my boots was too loud in the cold air. Every few steps, I'd glance up and see the Douglas place getting closer, a black hole at the end of the world. The air felt heavier, like the cold had weight. When I reached the mailbox, a rusted metal box slumped on a bent post, I stopped. The house loomed ahead. I could see the porch, the tilted steps, the door with its paint blistered into curls. And then I saw light, not from the house. From inside my own head, like a memory suddenly turning on. I remembered being in that house, which was impossible because I'd never been inside. But I could see it. The hallway with faded wallpaper, the smell of old soap, the creak of a loose board under my foot. And behind it all, something else. A sound like someone dragging their fingernails down the inside of my skull. I turned around and walked home without looking back. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not Paul, not my parents. But that night, I dreamed I was standing in the Douglas living room. The curtains were gone. The windows showed nothing but blank white. In the dream, I knew something was just outside those windows. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, pressing its face against the glass. Breathing. I woke up with my mouth dry and my pillow damp with sweat. Over the next week, little things started happening. I'd hear footsteps behind me when I walked home from school. My bedroom door would be open in the morning, even though I remembered shutting it. And sometimes, just for a second, I'd see that same blank white out of the corner of my eye. Then Paul disappeared. He was last seen leaving the diner after the late shift. His car was found on the shoulder of Larch Road, keys still in the ignition, driver's door wide open. The sheriff organized a search party, but no one wanted to walk past the Douglas house. They skirted it like a hole in the ground. I didn't join the search, not because I didn't want to find Paul, but because I already knew where he'd gone. I knew the moment I heard the news. It was like the house had whispered it to me. That night, I dreamed again. Same room, same white windows. But this time, I wasn't alone. Paul was standing in the corner, facing the wall. His hands were at his sides. His breathing was too fast. I called his name, but his shoulders didn't move. When he finally turned around, his eyes were completely white. The next morning, I walked to the Douglas house. No flashlight, no boots crunching gravel, just me and the cold. My breath came out in short clouds. The front door was open, not all the way, just enough to show a slice of black. The smell of damp wood hit me before I stepped inside. The hallway was exactly like the memory I shouldn't have. Same wallpaper, same loose board under my right foot. I walked to the living room. The curtains were gone. The windows glowed white. I stood there waiting for something to happen, and it did. The white outside the windows moved. It was subtle at first, like a shadow shifting under a sheet. Then a shape pressed against the glass from the other side. It didn't have features, not exactly, but I could feel it smiling at me. My heart hammered in my chest. I heard footsteps upstairs, slow, deliberate. I turned toward the staircase and saw Paul at the top. His eyes were still white. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then I heard another set of footsteps, heavier, coming from behind him. A hand settled on his shoulder. Not a human hand. The fingers were too long, the joints bending in the wrong direction. Paul smiled. His teeth were the same color as his eyes. I ran. Out the front door, down Larch Road, past the mailbox. My lungs burned. I didn't stop until I reached my driveway. I locked my door. I stayed in my room until morning. I told myself it was a nightmare, that I'd imagined all of it. But when I checked my phone, I saw a new photo in my camera roll. It was the Douglas living room. The windows were white, and in the corner, Paul stood facing the wall. The police never found him. His parents moved away. The Douglas house still stands, though the porch finally collapsed last winter. People say it's even more dangerous now, structurally speaking. But that's not why you shouldn't go there. Here's the thing no one tells you. The white outside the windows isn't light, it's absence. It's everything that isn't supposed to be here, pressing to get in. And sometimes if you stand too close, it gets its hands through. I still dream about that room. The shape at the glass hasn't moved away. I think it's waiting for me to come back. And I'm afraid that one day soon, I will. I grew up in a quiet little town in northern Arkansas, the kind of place where people wave when they pass you on the road and gossip spreads faster than the weather changes. It was 1981, I had just turned 18, and my life revolved around school, church, and helping out at my family's small grocery store. My mom was the type to keep the floors spotless, so clean that you could eat off them, and my dad knew every customer by name. Life felt predictable, until I met Daniel Cross. Daniel was the youngest son of Judge Malcolm Cross, a man whose presence could silence a room before he even spoke. Everyone in town respected or feared him. Daniel wasn't like his father on the surface. He had a smile that could talk you into anything, hair that looked like it belonged in a shampoo commercial, and a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world when he talked to you. That summer we started seeing each other in secret. I didn't tell a soul, not even my best friend Lisa, because I knew exactly what people would say, that I wasn't good enough for him. When I found out I was pregnant, I was sitting on the bathroom floor of a gas station 2 towns over, holding a test I'd bought in cash just to avoid being recognized. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. The first person I told was Daniel. I expected fear, sure, but also some kind of plan, some sense that we'd figure it out together. He barely spoke. He just kept chewing the inside of his cheek and staring at the floor. The next day, he showed up saying his family would take care of everything. I didn't understand what that meant at the time. Within a week, my life completely changed. My parents were told I'd had a mental breakdown and needed somewhere quiet to recover. That's the word they used, breakdown. I was sent to stay with some distant relative of my mother's, an older woman named Aunt Irene, in a sagging farmhouse almost 60 miles from home. No phone, no car, no way to contact anyone. My dad didn't even drive me there. Daniel's uncle did, silent the whole ride. The house smelled like dust and mildew. Aunt Irene, whom I'd never met before, wore thick glasses and orthopedic sandals and kept her curtains drawn at all hours. She didn't ask questions, didn't offer comfort, and kept the house stripped of anything that could distract me. No TV, no radio, just a stack of religious tracts and a Bible with brittle, yellowing pages. Days bled together. I spent most of my time staring out the back window at an endless stretch of overgrown fields. The silence pressed on me so hard it felt physical. I wasn't allowed into town, and nobody wrote. Months passed. My belly grew. The quiet around me grew thicker. I started whispering to the baby just to hear my own voice. One morning, I saw Judge Cross's black Lincoln parked in the driveway. He didn't come inside, just spoke with Aunt Irene on the porch. She nodded the whole time, eyes on the ground. After he left, she brought me a suitcase and said I needed to pack. "They found a better place for you," she told me. No details, no explanation. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, what if I never come back? The next morning, Daniel showed up. I barely recognized him. Thinner, pale, dark circles under his eyes. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He mumbled something about a private clinic in Missouri where it would all be handled. When I said I didn't want to go, I begged him to tell my parents the truth. That's when he snapped. His voice turned sharp, said it was too late for that the plans were already in motion. The way he said it made my stomach twist. That night, while Aunt Irene was asleep, I took the suitcase and walked out the back door. I followed the county road for miles under the moonlight until I reached a 24-hour gas station. The kid working the counter let me use the payphone for free. I called Lisa. 6 hours later, she pulled up in her brother's beat-up pickup truck. She hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. She told me that everyone thought I'd been sent to a private mental facility out west and that my parents were told not to visit. Daniel, meanwhile, had gone back to college like nothing had happened. I stayed with Lisa's family for a couple of weeks, hidden away in their basement. Eventually, I found a women's shelter in Little Rock that helped girls like me. That's where I gave birth to my daughter, Rachel. She had a full head of dark hair and the strongest lungs I'd ever heard. Years later, I learned the truth. One of Daniel's cousins got drunk at a wedding and spilled everything. The Cross family had paid off doctors, forged medical records, and arranged the whole thing so they could take my baby without my consent. To them, I wasn't a person, just a problem to be erased quietly. I changed my name. I moved states. I raised Rachel on my own. She's in college now. Sharp, independent, full of fire. She doesn't know the whole story yet. One day I'll tell her, not for sympathy, but so she understands exactly how far some people will go to protect power, and how far you have to go to protect yourself. I grew up in Harlow, the kind of place that's a map dot until the highway turns slick and you need a tow. 2,000 people, if you count the dogs. We had one main street, 3 churches, a diner that swapped names every time it swapped owners, and a tornado siren that lived on a steel leg behind the post office. The siren was older than most of us. If you asked it to, it could peel your thoughts back like paint. People always picture tornado sirens as a Midwestern thing, but storms don't care about borders, and neither did Harlow. The siren had been our town soundtrack, testing every first Wednesday at noon, calling volunteer firefighters when a pager failed, and once, for real, when a black wall rolled in across the state line and tore a dozen roofs open like gift wrap. It did its job, and we respected it. Until last winter. Until it started talking back. I was on the midnight shift at the dispatch office when it first went wrong. Harlow doesn't need a full-time dispatcher, so they give the job to someone who can stay awake and not panic. That night, the lights hummed, the coffee tasted like burnt pennies, and my brother Josh texted me to ask if he could borrow my truck in the morning. He was 20, half grown and half kid, always borrowing things and always returning them with a story. At 2:14 a.m., the tornado siren wound up by itself. The callboard stayed blank, no thunderstorm alerts, no pager tones, just that whine, lifting into the air like it wanted to scrape the frost off the moon. I did the usual, checked weather radar, called the fire chief, and called the sheriff. Nothing. Then the siren changed. It dipped. It didn't stop. It sank, like a choir warming up in a basement. And then it spoke my name. I know how that sounds. I know a siren is a motor and a mouth, all wind and teeth, and that you could split it open with a wrench and find nothing human inside. But it said, Mara. Not over the radio, not through a phone, and not in the way a mind invents words from wind. It said my name, soft, like the way my mother used to say it when I was sleeping, when she wanted to wake me without scaring me. I didn't write it down in the log. I didn't tell anyone until later, and by then, everyone had already heard their own. The next day, the whole town was full of jokes. Sirens haunted, folks said at the diner, and maybe it's calling the lost library books back, outside the brick schoolhouse, but no one laughed at night. The siren didn't blare every hour, just sometimes, and only after midnight. People said it wasn't the same sound for everyone. For me, it was my name. For Mr. Klein, whose wife had died the spring before, it was her voice singing the first hymn of his wedding. For the sheriff, it was a wordless coo, the exact sound he'd heard through a baby monitor on the night his son was born. Everyone heard something that mattered more than it should. It made your chest hurt. It made your feet want to move. 3 days in, Josh walked out of our mother's house and didn't come back. I was on day shift then, trying to catch sleep at noon and failing. Mom called me, steady-voiced because she'd taught herself that trick when Dad left. "He went out to smoke," she said. "He was barefoot." Barefoot in December, the kind of detail you can't look away from. We found his cigarette in the backyard, 2 puffs and no ash, like he'd been interrupted mid-breath. We found prints in the frost, full-footed, headed toward the creek. We found nothing after that. The search team did what search teams do, grid by grid, polite questions to neighbors, pylons of floodlights sinking into mud. The siren didn't sound the entire time, not once. It held itself tight inside its metal throat while we tore our throats open, calling for him. At the station, the fire chief, Mr. Bell, a retired lineman who looked like he'd been carved with a chainsaw, propped the siren manual on his thighs and said, "It's a Federal Model 5A, 7.5 horsepower, single-phase AC. It doesn't talk." He and the town electrician climbed the tower and took the housing off. They found a family of starlings in the horn and a ring of old wasp nests like a crown. They found frayed wiring wrapped with electrical tape and a fuse that should have blown and hadn't. They didn't find a speaker. They didn't find a person, a prank device, or a recorder. They didn't find my brother. But at 2:14 again that night, same minute, like an appointment, the siren rose and the town held its breath. And this time, instead of a voice, there was a sound like someone inhaling through their nose, not snoring, not wind. The sound you make when you're standing in the dark and you think you might finally remember what you forgot. The second person who went missing was Mrs. Allen, a teacher who retired the year I left for college. Her car was parked behind the Methodist church. She'd been seen at the library, where she had a habit of rearranging the large print books after the teen volunteers put them in the wrong place. She never made it home. Her front door was locked and her cat was hungry, and the librarian said, "She said something strange to me about hearing her husband in the siren. He's been gone 16 years. After that, the joke stopped. We stopped mentioning the siren in daylight. In a town like ours, superstition wears a practical coat. You stop naming what you think might eat you. I did say it out loud once. I told the sheriff in his office where the heating vent rattled. "It's calling people," I said. "Not everyone, but the ones who go out in it, alone. It calls them with what they want most." He rubbed his eyes and said, "That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Someone to blame." He was kind. He had that look men get when they've carried too many families into bad news and have to keep their faces made of something that doesn't fall apart. "Mara, none of this is on you." I wanted it to be on me. If it had been mine, I could have turned it off. There are things you don't put in a report, like the way the town changed around the edges. This is the part that's hard to make sound true. But Harlow shrank. You'd drive a road you'd driven since you were 16 and find a new curve, a fence that didn't used to be there, a patch of trees someone swore had always stood that way. Houses felt farther apart from one another. The streetlights held a little less light. The distance between your front porch and your car gained another step. Not big distances, enough to notice, enough to make you late, or to make you turn back for your scarf even if you were sure you were wearing it. We told ourselves it was winter playing tricks. Maybe it was. Or maybe the town was pulling in its edges like a blanket. One night, I parked under the siren and waited. I kept my window cracked and my finger on the ignition. I wasn't going to let it say my name again without answering. At 2:14, the motor woke with a shiver. The horn turned toward me, a slow grind, as if it could smell me. It didn't say Mara. It said, "Where did you put me?" My throat closed. It was my voice. I heard my own tone coming back at me, doubled by metal, as if I'd thrown a word against a canyon and the canyon had decided to do more than echo. "Where did you put me?" The siren asked again, like it was a customer at the diner, like it had been waiting its turn, and now I was stalling. "I don't know," I said, steady as I could. "Who are you?" Silence. For a second, I thought it had chosen not to play this round. Then the horn turned a hair's breadth, and the motor softened its spin. "Down," it said. "Down where it's warm." The creek was frozen, but you could hear water moving underneath if you lay on your stomach and put your ear to the ice. I did that when I was 10, with Josh laughing beside me and Mom yelling from the bank. When the ice shifts and the world sings under it, it sounds like whale song and truck brakes and throat music. It sounded like that now, through the siren. I didn't sleep. I waited until dawn, and then I called Mr. Bell. "I need the ladder," I told him, "and a wrench." He didn't ask why. In small towns, people who ask why are from somewhere else. We took the horn off the siren and brought it down like a casket. We set it on sawhorses in the firehouse. We opened the control box and found a nest of wires older than both of us put together. We cleaned what we could. We replaced what we could. "Test?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. Behind the post office, the ground dips toward the creek, and the postmaster lets the weeds grow because the land isn't technically his. I walked down there with my gloves cut to the knuckles. The frost made my breath into smoke. There's a culvert that runs beneath the road, a dark mouth with a skirt of icicles. I don't know how long I stood in front of it before I heard the breathing. Not wind, breath. Slow and patient. Like something asleep that knows you're there and is pretending it doesn't. "Where did you put me?" I asked, in my voice and the sirens both, because maybe the two are the same once you've fed a word to metal. The breathing kept time with mine. In, out, in, out. Then it changed. It rose into a question. The sound doesn't have a word in English. It's what a mother says when she's counting heads at a playground and someone is missing. I crawled in. The culvert was slick with a skin of algae and thin ice. My gloved hands slid. I banged my knee. It was too small to turn around and too tight to pretend I wasn't doing what I was doing. The light from the mouth shrank to a ragged coin, and even though I could still stand up if I had to, the air felt like it was lying down on me. The breathing was ahead now, not behind. I moved toward it like I was being reeled in. It wasn't someone. It was a cavity. A bubble had formed in the mud where the culvert bent. A little room carved by water and thaw and time. There were things in it. A small pile of coins, a lighter, and a deck of cards in a rubber band. Things our town had dropped and the creek had decided to keep. And in the center, half buried, was a ceramic frog. It was stupid and bright even in that gloom, with a chipped lip and eyes painted too wide. I recognized it. It had lived on our mother's porch since we were kids. Josh and I used to use it as a bank. We fed it dollar bills and borrowed them back. When Dad left, I smashed it and scooped our money into my backpack because I was 13 and angry and practical. We hid the shards behind the shed. Mom would have hated it if she knew. I dug the frog out of the mud. The breath went quiet. The culvert felt smaller. I backed out, scraping my shoulders, holding the frog in front of me like it was a hostage and the dark would negotiate. When I stood in the weak sun with the frog in my hands, I realized I'd been crying without noticing. Mud streaked my face where I'd wiped my eyes on my wrist. My gloves shook. I wanted so badly for this to be enough. I wanted to bring something up from the dark and have it be a boy in a hoodie, teeth chattering, eyes sheepish, saying, "You kept it?" At 2:14 that night, the siren wound itself up again. I had the frog on the passenger seat. I put it on the hood and climbed the ladder. I held the horn like a face and said, "I found it." The siren didn't speak. The motor ran, spinning wind, and the horn vibrated against my fingertips. But underneath the mechanical hum, there was a low sound, like relief. "Not all at once," the siren said at last. My voice again, always my voice. Never all at once. People stopped disappearing after I found the frog. That's too clean a way to say it. People stopped disappearing the way a fever breaks, slow with sweat and shivering, and you don't trust the first hours of cool. We had a week with no calls, then 2, and we started sleeping again, and the jokes came back in their careful daytime way. The siren still made the wrong kind of sounds, my name sometimes, the intake of breath, the little asking noise, but they were quieter, less sure. The town felt a hair wider. I could reach my car from my front steps without adding a step. We never found Josh. We never found Mrs. Allen. The sheriff retired a month later without saying why. Mr. Bell nodded at me once in the grocery store like we'd lifted a piano together and put it down where it needed to go. Mom started leaving the porch light on again. The frog sat on the railing with a new crack glued neat, a smile painted too wide, like it knew a joke we didn't. I still work nights. Routine keeps you stitched together. The siren tests on Wednesdays. When it winds up, the clean, normal way, and winds down without saying my name, the town breathes in relief. And I do the thing you do when you live in small places that keep their own counsel. You decide what to believe, and then you stick to it until it holds. Here is what I believe, as close to true as I can manage. Towns keep records that aren't paper. They keep ledgers of favors and grudges, prayers and apologies, things you broke and hid and meant to fix. When you sleep, the town counts. When something goes missing and you don't give it back, the town asks where you put it. If you don't answer, it asks in a louder way. If you still don't answer, it opens its mouth and sings you into the dark with what you want most. And you go because that's the weight you're carrying. I also believe this. Sometimes, if you crawl into the cold and you come up with something chipped and ugly and honest in your hands, something you stole, something you should have mourned out loud, the mouth closes. Not forever. Towns don't forgive forever, but long enough to sleep. Long enough to hold a cracked frog and listen to a siren that's just a siren. Last week, a group of high schoolers spray-painted hearts on the siren tower and hung a string of paper cranes from the bolts. I watched them in the camera glow. I didn't stop them. When the wind moved, the cranes rustled, and for a second, I heard breathing again and almost looked toward the creek. But it was only paper, only wind finding its way through folded wings. At 2:14, the hour that still owns me, I parked under the tower and waited. The motor kicked on, steady, mechanical, the way it should be. The horn turned once, a lazy twitch, and then held still. It said nothing. I rolled the window down anyway, and I said, for no one and for everyone, I didn't put him anywhere. The town listened. I could feel it, the way you feel the weather coming in your joints. I could feel it doing its numbers, and I could feel it decide, for that hour, for that night, to believe me. I didn't plan to end up in Cedar Hollow. The map didn't even mark it as a town, just a bend in the river and a few lines of road like the veins of a dry leaf. My car died there in the middle of a rainstorm, a dull clunk from the engine, and then nothing but the sound of water on the roof. It was October, the kind of cold that feels wet even when you're dry. My phone had no signal. The only light came from a dim porch lamp across the road, half hidden behind dripping pine trees. The woman who answered the door looked like she'd been expecting me. She was tall, her hair tied back with a scarf, eyes the gray of dirty ice. She didn't ask my name, didn't ask what I needed, just said, "You can stay at the boarding house until morning." The boarding house was 2 streets over. She pointed the way and shut the door before I could thank her. The boarding house was old, 3 stories of weather-stained wood, shutters hanging loose, the smell of damp settling in my nose as soon as I stepped inside. The lobby had a front desk, but no one was behind it. A single key sat on the counter. Room 5. The tag was wood, worn smooth by decades of hands. The staircase groaned under my weight. The hallway upstairs was narrow, lined with faded wallpaper patterned in twisting vines. My room was small. Bed, dresser, a single chair in the corner. The window looked out onto the street, where the rain had slowed to a mist. I was too tired to think. I lay down fully clothed and closed my eyes. At 2:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of someone breathing in my room. Not close, just inside the edge of hearing. Slow, even breaths, like someone asleep on the floor. I didn't move. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and I could just make out the chair in the corner. It was occupied. The shape in the chair was tall. It sat perfectly still, hands resting on its knees. I told myself it was just the coat I'd thrown over the back earlier, that I'd imagined the sound, that I was half asleep. I blinked. The chair was empty. The next morning, I found the lobby still empty. No clerk, no guests, no sign of life. The street outside was quiet. A few houses, a shuttered store, a gas pump so old it still had a spinning number wheel. No cars passed while I walked to the only cafe I could find. The woman at the counter poured me coffee without asking. She was in her 50s, hair pinned up, eyes sharp. "You're new," she said flatly. Not a question. "My car broke down," I said, "hoping there's a mechanic." Her mouth tightened. "Not anymore." We didn't speak after that. Back at the boarding house, I tried the front desk bell. The sound rang too long, like the air swallowed it slowly. No one came. I checked the doors to the other rooms. They were all locked. When night fell, I tried to read to keep my mind busy. The rain had stopped, but the streets outside were deserted. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the breathing returned. I didn't open my eyes. I couldn't. My chest felt heavy, my arms numb. The air smelled faintly of damp earth. The sound was closer this time, just beside the bed. When it stopped, I opened my eyes to the sight of the chair in the corner, occupied again. The figure was clearer now. A man, maybe, but too tall, his limbs too long. His head tilted slightly, as if listening. I blinked, and the chair was empty again. On the third day, I tried to leave Cedar Hollow. I packed my bag and walked to the highway. No one was on the road. The forest pressed close on both sides, branches creaking in the wind. I walked for 2 hours before realizing I was back where I started. The gas pump, the cafe, the same sagging porch. The woman at the cafe watched me through the window as I passed. She didn't look surprised. That night, I decided to wait for the thing in the chair. I stayed awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with my bag at my feet. The clock on the dresser ticked toward 2:17. The breathing began, slow and steady. The figure formed in the chair, piece by piece, long legs, folded hands, the dark oval of a head. This time, it didn't vanish when I blinked. Its chest rose and fell. "Who are you?" I asked. It didn't answer. The sound of breathing filled the room. Then I realized. It wasn't breathing. It was me. The figure was breathing in perfect time with my own chest. I stood up. It stood too. We faced each other in the dim light. My skin prickled, the hairs on my arms rising. It took one step toward me. I stepped back. When my heel hit the wall, the figure stopped. Then it leaned forward, impossibly far, its face inches from mine. In the dark, I could only see the outline of its jaw, the faint movement of its lips. It whispered something I couldn't understand. Then it was gone. By morning, I had decided to leave again, this time without the road. I took a path through the woods, keeping the sun at my back, forcing myself forward even when the undergrowth closed in. Hours passed. My legs ached. I tripped on roots. The air grew colder. When I stepped out of the trees, I was standing on Larch Street, the gas pump, the cafe, the boarding house. My stomach turned to ice. I didn't sleep that night. At 2:17, I sat in the chair myself, facing the bed. I wanted to see if it would take my place. It did. The figure appeared on the bed, lying in my exact position, hands on my stomach, head turned toward the wall. Its breathing was mine. Every rise and fall matched perfectly. I stayed in the chair until dawn. When sunlight finally crept into the room, the figure was gone. The bed was cold. The next day, the woman from the cafe knocked on my door. She handed me a paper bag with bread and cheese inside. "You're staying," she said. Again, not a question. "I don't want to," I said. "No one does." Her eyes lingered on me, and I felt the weight of something unspoken. Then she left. That night, I barricaded the door with the chair. At 2:17, I heard the breathing start again. Louder now. The sound came from inside the room. No, from inside my chest. My arms and legs went cold. I tried to move, but my body felt distant, like I was watching it from outside. The figure was standing over me. It leaned down, its face level with mine. Its skin was pale, almost translucent. Its eyes were not eyes at all, just deep hollows that seemed to drink the light. It whispered again, and this time I understood. "You were always here." I woke up on the floor, and the chair had toppled over. The window was open, rain blowing in. My clothes were damp. My watch said 2:18 a.m. Days blurred together after that. I stopped trying to leave. The woman from the cafe brought food. I never saw anyone else. The figure came every night, sometimes in the chair, sometimes in the bed, always at 2:17. Sometimes it looked like me, sometimes it didn't. I started to wonder if there was ever a road out of Cedar Hollow, if my car had ever really broken down, if I'd ever had a life before the boarding house. Last night, I didn't wait in the chair or the bed. I stood by the window and watched the street. At 2:17, the breathing began behind me. I turned around slowly. There were two figures now. One in the chair, one in the bed, both breathing with my lungs. They didn't vanish when I blinked. I think tonight there will be a third, and I think it will be the real me. If you're reading this and you ever find yourself in Cedar Hollow, don't stay at the boarding house. Don't talk to the woman at the cafe, and whatever you do, don't be awake at 2:17 a.m., because that's when it starts replacing you. The first time I heard the name Deadwater, I was 10 years old. My uncle used it as a punchline. We were driving to my aunt's place in another county, and we passed a sign that read, Deadwater, population 482. The paint on the sign was faded, the numbers uneven where someone had nailed new digits over the old ones. "Don't stop in Deadwater," my uncle said, half smiling. "People who stop there tend to stay." I laughed because I thought it was a joke. I didn't realize until years later that he wasn't joking. I didn't go back to Deadwater until I was 26, stranded after a delivery van broke down on a narrow county road in the middle of a freezing March night. The dispatcher told me a tow wouldn't get there until morning. The nearest town with a motel, Deadwater. I remembered my uncle's voice, but my phone battery was dying. The air hurt to breathe, and the dark pressed too close. I told myself a bed was a bed, no matter the name of the town. The streets were unnervingly quiet. No dogs barking, no cars, no hum of televisions from behind thin curtains. The street lamps worked, but their light was the color of old paper, and the shadows they threw didn't match the objects making them. A tree's shadow would bend the wrong way. A lamppost shadow would lean toward me. The only place open was a squat brick building with a flickering neon sign. Rooms. The woman behind the counter didn't ask for ID or payment. She slid me a key with the number 2 on a brass tag. "You'll want to keep your curtains shut," she said. "Light draws them." I didn't ask what she meant by them. Something about the way she said it told me I didn't want to know. The room was small but clean. Too clean. No scuffs on the baseboards, no dust in the corners. The bedspread was stiff, as if it had never been used. The curtains were thick, heavy enough to block all light from outside. I closed them. At 3:03 a.m., I woke up thirsty. The tap water in the bathroom came out warm and tasted metallic. While I was rinsing my mouth, I heard something tap against the window. Not a knock, a tap, like a fingernail against glass. I froze. The sound came again, slow and deliberate. The curtains were drawn, but the fabric bulged inward with each tap, as if something on the other side was pushing lightly, testing. I stood there for what felt like hours until the sound stopped. When I finally crawled back into bed, I didn't sleep. In the morning, I asked the woman at the desk where I could get breakfast. She told me the diner was 3 blocks down. Her eyes flicked to the curtains in my room before she added, "Don't walk too close to the drains." The streets looked different in daylight, but not better. The buildings leaned in odd directions. Some had windows bricked over. A faint smell of algae clung to the air. On the way to the diner, I noticed the drains she'd mentioned, round metal grates set into the curbs. From each one, a slow trickle of dark water ran toward the gutter, even though it hadn't rained in days. The trickles didn't reflect the light. I caught myself walking in the center of the street. The diner was almost empty. A man in a work jacket sat at the counter, staring into his coffee like it was a scrying mirror. The waitress moved like her body was too heavy for her bones. "You're passing through?" she asked when I ordered. "Just for the night." "Good," she said. "Don't stay past the 3rd sunrise." I waited for her to explain, but she didn't. When I left the diner, I noticed something strange. The population number on the Deadwater sign at the edge of town had changed. Yesterday, it was 482. Now it was 483. I tried to leave after breakfast. The road out twisted in ways that didn't match my memory of coming in. Every turn brought me back toward the center of town. The landmarks repeated, the post office with its boarded windows, the park with swings that swayed without wind, the same pale stray dog that watched me from the corner every time I passed. After 3 hours, I gave up and returned to the motel. That night, I didn't sleep at all. At 3:03 a.m., the tapping began again. This time, I didn't freeze. I went to the window and pulled the curtain back an inch. I wish I hadn't. Something was crouched on the other side of the glass. Its skin was the color of wet stone, stretched too thin over sharp bones. Its eyes were black, not glossy but matte, like holes. Its mouth hung open in a shape that suggested laughter, but no sound came out. When I moved the curtain, its head snapped toward me. I dropped the fabric and stumbled back. The tapping grew faster, harder, until the glass trembled in the frame. Then it stopped. In the morning, I found wet handprints on the outside of the glass. They were too long, the fingers tapering to sharp points. I decided I wouldn't spend another night in dead water. I packed my bag and walked out. The woman at the desk was gone. No one was in the streets. The drains trickled steadily, and I thought I saw something shift beneath the surface of the water. I found a road I hadn't seen before and followed it. It led out past the houses, into open fields. My chest loosened when I saw the tree line ahead. I thought I'd made it. Then I heard water. At first it was faint, like a creek hidden in the grass. But it grew louder with every step, until it roared in my ears. The air grew damp and heavy. I looked down and saw the pavement glistening, not from rain, but from a thin sheet of water sliding over it. It flowed toward me, uphill, moving against gravity. I backed away. The water followed. I ran. The sound chased me, always just behind. When I finally stumbled into the center of town again, the streets were dry. The drains gurgled softly. The population sign read 484. That night I pushed the dresser against the window. At 3:03 a.m., there was no tapping. Instead, I heard water dripping, slow at first, then faster. The smell of algae filled the room. I turned on the light. The carpet beneath the window was dark with moisture. A thin stream of water trickled from under the curtains, pooling around the dresser legs. The water was rising. I grabbed my bag and opened the door. The hallway was flooded ankle deep. Something moved in the water, brushing against my skin, a touch too deliberate to be current. I ran down the stairs, splashing through the lobby. The front door opened into knee-deep water that filled the street. Shapes moved under the surface, pacing me as I waded toward the diner. By the time I reached the diner, the water was at my waist. The waitress stood in the doorway, dry as a bone. "You stayed past the second sunrise," she said. "Help me," I begged. Her eyes slid past me to the street. "They've already decided." The water surged around my chest. Cold hands brushed my ribs. I tried to turn, but something pulled me under. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my motel room. The carpet was dry, the curtains were drawn. My bag was in the corner. The clock read 3:02 a.m. At 3:03, the tapping began. I don't know how many nights I've been here. The days blur. Every time I try to leave, the town folds in on itself, bending roads into loops. The population sign keeps climbing, from 487 to 489 now. I haven't seen the woman at the desk in days. The waitress brings food without speaking. I don't open the curtains. The tapping grows louder each night. I think when the sign reaches 492, the tapping will stop, and then it'll be my turn to go into the drains. Dead water doesn't kill you quickly. It wears you down, makes you part of the count. Everyone here was passing through once. Everyone here thought they could leave. If you ever see that sign, dead water, don't stop. Don't even slow down. Because once the water knows your name, it will call to you every night at 3:03, and one night you'll answer. When I took the job in Hammond, I thought it would be a quiet way to get my life back on track. Small towns always seemed simpler to me. Less crime, fewer strangers, a place where you knew who was knocking before you opened the door. Hammond was like that. Population 1,200, a single grocery store, 2 diners, 1 gas station, and more farmland than you could see in a day. I rented a small place on Miller Road, a narrow strip of cracked asphalt lined with sagging fences and old trees that dropped branches during storms. My nearest neighbor was about 100 yards away, an older guy named Dennis Weller, retired, kept to himself. The first week, nothing strange happened. I went to work at the county office, came home, cooked, and slept. But in the second week, I noticed the cars. They were parked at the far end of Miller Road, right before the asphalt turned to dirt. Old sedans, beat-up pickups. They'd sit there with their engines off, sometimes for hours. Always different plates. Some from in-state, some from 3 counties over. At first I thought maybe it was teenagers drinking or smoking where no one would bother them, but the people in those cars weren't kids. They were middle-aged men mostly, a few women. They just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the trees where the road ended. By the third night, I'd counted 6 different cars in the same spot. I asked Dennis about it one afternoon when I saw him checking his mailbox. He didn't look at me when he answered. "People like to watch the woods," he said. "What's in the woods?" "Trees," he said, and went inside. That was the first time I felt something tighten in my stomach. On Friday night, I decided to walk down there myself. The air was damp, the sun sinking low. I kept to the side of the road, listening to the hum of crickets. The last car of the night was just pulling away as I got closer. The trees at the end of Miller Road weren't special. No signs, no fences, just pine and maple growing close together, the dirt road disappearing into them. I stepped onto the dirt and heard the crunch of dry leaves. After 20 feet, it was darker, quieter. The air smelled faintly metallic. That's when I noticed the trail. Narrow, almost hidden, leading off to the right. The ground was worn down like it had been walked on a lot. I followed it for maybe 50 yards before I saw the clearing. It was small, ringed by trees so close together you couldn't see past them. In the center was a patch of bare ground. No grass, no leaves, just dirt. It looked almost like someone had raked it smooth. There were no footprints, no trash. But there was a sound. It was faint, coming from under the ground. A slow, rhythmic thump, like a heartbeat you could feel in your shoes. I stood there until my skin prickled and my neck went cold. Then I turned around and walked home without looking back. The next morning I called the sheriff's office. A deputy came by, a young guy, polite. I told him about the cars, the clearing, and the sound. He nodded through the whole thing, then said, "That's county land back there. No law against parking on the road, probably just hunters." When I asked about the sound, he shrugged. Groundwater, pipes, lots of reasons. He wrote nothing down. When he left, I noticed his cruiser drove straight to the end of Miller Road and parked there for 10 minutes before heading back toward town. Over the next week, the pattern didn't change. Cars at night, the same spot. People just watching. I stopped walking down there, but I started paying attention. Sometimes the people got out of their cars and stood by the woods, not talking, not moving, just staring. Once, a man carried a small box into the trees and came back without it. On Thursday night, one of the watchers saw me looking from my porch. He didn't wave. He just stood next to his truck and stared until I went inside. 2 nights later, a woman went missing. Her name was Lydia Carter. She worked at the grocery store. I'd spoken to her maybe 3 times, short conversations about the weather and whether the coffee shipment had come in. She lived on the other side of town. The last person who saw her was the cashier on duty that night. She said Lydia left work at 8:15 p.m. and got into her car. She never made it home. The search started the next morning. Volunteers combed the woods, but the area at the end of Miller Road was never mentioned in the briefings. When I brought it up to one of the search coordinators, he said, "We already checked that." I knew they hadn't. I'd been watching. On the 3rd night of the search, I saw movement at the end of the road again. 2 cars. Their headlights were off, but I could see figures with flashlights slipping into the trees. I couldn't stop myself. I grabbed my jacket and walked down the road. The cars were empty when I passed them. Their doors were locked, keys gone. I followed the trail into the clearing. The bare patch of dirt was different now. It wasn't smooth anymore. There were marks, straight lines crossing each other, like something had been dragged across the ground. The sound was louder too, but not the steady thump I'd heard before. Now it was irregular, uneven, like digging. I turned off my flashlight and crouched at the edge of the clearing. The figures came back a few minutes later. 2 men, one carrying a shovel. The other was holding something wrapped in a tarp. They didn't speak. They just went to the bare patch and started working. I left before they saw me. I didn't go home. I walked straight to the sheriff's house. Small town. You know where people live. I knocked until he came to the door, half asleep. I told him what I'd seen. He didn't ask for details, didn't write anything down. He just said, "The best thing you can do is stay in your house at night. Miller Road's not your concern." The next morning, the search for Lydia Carter ended. No announcement, no explanation. Just stopped. That night, there were no cars at the end of the road. the clearing stayed empty for a week. Then, on the following Monday, a new name appeared on the mailbox across from Dennis Weller's. Fresh paint. The house had been empty since I moved in. Now there was a family, quiet, polite, kept to themselves. I saw the father once in town. He was one of the men I'd seen in the clearing. I kept my head down after that. I didn't walk toward the woods. I didn't ask questions. I waved to Dennis when I saw him, but we never talked again. But every so often, usually around midnight, I'd hear the sound. Faint, coming from far away. The thump. Slow. Rhythmic. Like something in the ground that never really stopped. I don't know what happened to Lydia Carter. I don't know what the watchers are looking for, or burying, or digging up. I don't know how many people in Hammond know about the clearing. What I do know is that the population sign hasn't changed since she disappeared, and sometimes, late at night, I see a single car at the end of Miller Road again. Engine off, lights out, someone in the driver's seat just watching the trees. Everything that happened can be explained if you want it to. The cars, hunters, or people meeting in private. The sound, groundwater, the clearing, just a place where the soil won't grow anything. The missing woman? She left town, or worse. Someone hid her somewhere the searchers didn't think to look. But explanations don't make it feel less wrong. Because every time I walk to my mailbox, I can feel someone at the far end of the road watching me. And I think they're waiting for me to look back.